This call is now being recorded. This call is now.
Well, welcome everyone, Core Black Raven Meditation. You can't see him yet, but we have a very special guest for you today. His name is Ryan. He goes by Tao Druidry on YouTube, and I'm very excited for this conversation. And we're just going to be as natural as we can in this very unnatural situation and ask Ryan the beautiful question: who are you?
My name's Ryan. I run a channel called Tao Druidry, and I was inspired to start it because I often do I Ching readings for myself, and I find that it's helpful to kind of get a framework for what's going on in the world, as with any divination system. But this one is highly praised by the likes of Carl Jung and one of my favorites, Terence McKenna. And it's good in Carl Jung's perspective for sort of mapping the subconscious spaces. And I already am really interested in non-dual traditions. Kashmir Shiaism is one of my favorites. One of the people that I follow on YouTube is Igor Kufayev, and he's incredible. You should check him out. But using a non-dual divination system is something I'm very, very fond of, and has helped me get through some hard times in my life, and sort of help me feel like I can build a framework for my own subconscious and start understanding how the things that are bubbling up from that space can be kind of worked with. And you can learn what the role of the sage might be in any given situation in your life. So it's really helpful in those kind of ways.
So what compelled you to bring it to YouTube, and what was your kind of idea of what you were going to do with it on YouTube?
So when I started using it, I quite quickly moved out of using any tarot work that I did, except for doing like year ahead spreads and stuff like that. But it became something that I realized took a lot of time, quite a lot more time than tarot reading, your average tarot reading. To do it in depth like I do, it is also that way. But when I started seeing the kind of progress that I was making in my own life, and a feeling of not being as scared of changing times, and kind of anxious to see what it meant when I was noticing changes in my outer world, or just in my own personal environment internally, and how I was relating to my world. But when I noticed how well I was kind of progressing and learning a lot about myself, I felt like it was something that was valuable enough to share. And so when I started, I basically didn't really bring anybody on board hardly at all with how I open things up. I just do it very ritualistically and don't really introduce anything that I'm doing hardly. But I come into it in kind of the same space that I do it myself. And that's kind of how the channel formed, was really just documenting my own readings for myself, but also feeling like someone else might potentially be able to use it for their own benefit as well.
I love that for many reasons, and I feel it reflects a lot in your work, because I can't remember exactly how you and I met, but we both met about the same time that we started. I don't think either one of us even had 100 followers yet when we met. So we've kind of been on this really interesting, like, back and forth journey of just kind of, the process that I don't know, as creators, we just know the other ones are going through, right? But not only that, but I saw that reflected in your spiritual work too on your YouTube page, because sometimes it can be easy when presenting spiritual things to give this facade or this veneer, right? And your work, even though there is a veneer to it, whenever you're in your space, in this ritualistic space, specifically in this background that we're looking at right now, it's very collected, but you also share these very raw and these very real elements of this process with your audience. And just tell me about that for you, because that, for me, that seems like, for a man like you, that's the real nuggets, when you can really put yourself out there and just give it. So I don't know. Tell me, am I off base with that statement?
No, I originally stuck very, very closely to just what I read. I would very infrequently veer off of that. I was never doing summations at the beginning, for instance. That took me at least 8 to 9 months, maybe 10 months to feel comfortable enough to do that. I would have my own kind of personal idea of what the reading meant, but I didn't feel confident enough, I suppose, to really chime in, so to speak. But that didn't stop me from chiming in my own ways, in different shorts that I would release, or just videos of talking about something that was helping me, maybe a shamanic kind of visualization tool or something like that. Um, but it's interesting because with the I Ching work, it's very somber and ritualistic, and has that kind of sacred tone to it. And I myself feel like I'm a pretty silly person, and so mixing those two is kind of feels almost like you're not keeping the spirit of the moment in the reading. But I've learned to kind of veer off script a little bit, and it allows me to feel like I can kind of mix the elements of myself in more of a balanced way into the whole thing, and also makes it quite a bit less boring. Even watching my own work, sometimes it can be very, very monotonous and just kind of like the same thing. Um, but yeah, I'm still looking for a good balance, so to speak, of how many jokes are acceptable to crack in the middle of this kind of somber experience, and while still keeping the tone, but also keeping it interesting.
Yeah, I love how you put that. That's beautiful. And also, being a practitioner myself, and watching, not only watching it, but hearing you articulate this mild intentionality with it. What I can't help but be compelled to reflect on is the embodiment of the actual words. Right? You're not like, that is the goal, right? This playfulness that has this veneered reverence when necessary. So, as you talked about finding the balance, I'm thinking, no, like, you're doing it, right? Like, and that's really cool in its own essence. Yeah, what are some struggles, or not even struggles, like, what are some points in this process for yourself that you hit, and you were just like, wow, this is something, like, this is a nugget, like, I have to give to someone else, like, I have to do just that video recording, hanging off your couch or whatever it is, like, you just have to give it. Just one of those
Often those
tidbits.
will often those will be situations where I've just been meditating for a long period of time. To be completely honest with you, usually my wife and I will have a kind of like a conversation, and it'll be like a building up of all of this um, subconscious stuff coming up in both of us, and then we'll have a discussion about it. And through that process, a lot will come out. And all of a sudden, it's like a lot of different things click. And then usually I'll go into a meditation or something, and then it'll feel like it's coming out even more. It's almost like an urge to kind of, if I and my wife are experiencing these kind of things, then it's probably, usually it reflects something that's going on collectively. And it'll feel like a pressure inside of me when it feels like that's about to happen. And often I don't think about it, and just boom, hit record and say what I need to say. And then, yeah, it can be really kind of therapeutic for myself to be able to talk it out as well. I find that it's often difficult to know how I feel about anything without having someone to bounce it off of and talk about with. And so it's kind of a little bit of that kind of process. I feel like if there's energies conflicted in me, they're bound to be conflicted in other people in a similar fashion. And if I'm connected to those people in some sort of way, then the relieving of that kind of tension in myself, but also in others, would probably help everybody.
Right. As the like me bias that's actually applicable to life, right? Yeah, I love that. Um, you answered a lot of my questions. I didn't really expect for it to go so fluidly. Um, so you have a segment in a lot of your videos where you say a son or a book chose by my son. And as you brought up your wife and this kind of way that you two kind of utilize each other's presence as what it sounds like a sacred tool, right? To see a bigger picture. You know, I see that kind of reflected in you bringing your son's children books. I think bringing a child's book into an adult space is brilliant, because it really it simplifies all these big words we have rolling around, right? So I'd just like to know, like, whose idea was it? Was it you or your son's? I have to know, to bring this segment into the work. And also, what do you feel it adds to the work?
It was, he's 4, and I read him a children's story every night to put him to bed. And the first time it happened, that it was kind of inspiring, an inspiring moment where things were connecting, both with what I was learning with I Ching work and what I was seeing in other tarot readers' readings and experiencing in my own life. And then it was incredibly simplified in a children's story. And so uh, I felt as though I was at a stage where I could kind of be a little bit more relaxed. And at that stage, I also felt that inspiration hit. And so, yeah, I brought that into the works. And it's been kind of rare that I've ever done that, but usually when it seems really, really applicable, I will. But it was just kind of a similar one of those times where it felt like it matched things, and just like you said it way more incredibly simply. And just the little pictures and everything. It's humorous to me because I'll always be showing the pictures and the I Ching commentaries and whatnot. And to just, I thought it would be kind of a surprising little twist where I'm acting all serious and bringing out a new book to read, and it's a children's book. This came about when I used to be reading a lot of works out of Taoist classics. And I remember you being interested in that and thinking that that was cool, especially, and commenting on that.
Yeah.
I don't do that as much anymore because the readings can be, an hour and a half long, sometimes upwards of 2 hours, depending on how many changing lines I get. So it's rare that I've done that in quite a long time either. I'm thinking about potentially wrapping it in. Let's say if I get a I Ching reading with no changing lines, then yeah, I could put some of that back in. But there's beautiful poetry, Taoist poetry. Louis Ming's one of my favorites. He writes the Taoist I Ching, and he also writes a lot of Taoist classics that are really alchemical in nature and sometimes just really beautifully, beautifully worded. It's almost like the imagery just puts you there. Um, I ran across somebody commenting on one of those videos asking about the book. It was Understanding Reality, which was by Louis Ming. And I listened to it again, and I probably need to break those out again because they're really, really profound and beautiful. And like I said, sometimes this alchemical Taoist poetry is just the most beautiful stuff. I'm really fond of haiku and poetry in all its facets, but the kind that puts you in a space where it's almost like you don't understand what's going on, but the imagery is sort of working on you. And I'll be honest, I don't quite understand all the stuff that I read, but I find that soaking myself in it has its own effects. And I start finding that the things become like they're unraveling within me uh, in their own kind of imagery. And it's kind of building this internal world that is also alchemical, which is just an enjoyable process to be a part of, to be honest.
Wonderful. It's beautiful. And yeah, the alchemical process, right? it's spoken to us in so many languages, right? It's really just about like what language we want to dance with, you know, and we can dance with all kinds of them and see that alchemical process, or we can choose one and, you know, to, like you said, to really, how'd you put it, to submerge yourself in it, right? To really like put yourself in it, no matter what you're doing, with the understanding that it is alchemical. It's this whole process that we're going through, and to go through it wholly. HOLY as well as WHOLEY, right? So yeah, this was the I Ching. Oh, so we didn't really talk about that as really all too much, but as I said, we kind of met each other, kind of just exchanging comments back and forth. I actually started my YouTube doing Taoist meditations daily. So this was the I Ching I learned from, and as I had explained to Ryan one day, because he was doing those fun little coins, and I said, I got to get me some of them coins. I've never got to do that part of. I studied the book, but I could never put those things together. So I got to the Tao Classics book that you recommended. I have read through that several times. It is multi-highlighted at this point. And yeah, like you said, it can get wordy, right? And sometimes you can literally be doing something else and pick up a child's book or hear a child say something, and you're like, oh, I just spent 2 hours reading about that and looking up words because I didn't know anything. And here's this beautiful life moment that just like embodies it. So I'll give the life moments instead, because that just feels so much, like you said, it's because it provokes something in us when we can give someone the image of, you know, being with our nieces, or, you know, that family event that the child says the one thing that you're like, this kid's a baby Buddha, you know? You know what I mean? Yeah, those things are amazing. But so I did go out and I got this I Ching divination kit. Nice. And so let me tell you, I have a sense. Did you grow up around coins, or liking coins, or having someone who collected coins, or did you collect them yourselves? Yes, I thought so, because I grew up with poker. So this set actually has coins and the tarot.
That's awesome.
And I was, of course, because I grew up with the cards, I was drawn to the cards. So even though I feel so graced I have these, I felt you know those rooms you walk in and you feel you should be a little better than you are. This is how I feel with these. So I stuck to these. So I thought if you maybe want to kind of, you know, really just sit for a moment in like our co-space of being practitioners, and, you know, we can start with a moment of silence, and then we as practitioners can just ask the cards if there's a message that someone coming to watch this video might need to hear today, and we can pull a card on that, and we'll read the card and talk about that. How would that feel? Okay,
that's
cool.
Great.
Okay, and since you know, Ryan's one of those people that whenever I need someone to just sit and meditate with and not talk to me, I go to his channel, and he has really wonderful energy. So I just invite everybody, if you'd like to participate, just in this collective talk. We're not fortune tellers, we're not mind readers. We're simply just sitting in the energy of us being together in this moment, and we're just asking divinity, what's a collective message, or just something that we all need to hear right now that can be of benefit. "38, opposing, small affairs and good fortune. You contain contradictory impulses within you, or see a situation from two angles at once, perhaps as things are and as omens. If you can scale down matters to small affairs, it is easier to give space to both visions, even using the opposing views as creative stimulus or challenge. What if the difference were not a threat? How could this tension be creative? And if you couldn't see eye to eye, what can you see?" So let's take a breath on that. That's That's a good one for this time, right?
Mm.
All right, and just when you're ready, I'd like you to start this one for us.
That's really that space between words. It's hard to talk over that.
I know, right? If we can't see eye to eye, what can we see? We can see
I've
the
been
spaces in between, right?
I've been thinking a lot about that lately, where you feel a connection to all sorts of people, and you may not have anywhere near the same beliefs, um, but feeling connected to them doesn't require that you agree with them. And any agreement is bound to be an illusion or a lie in some sense, in that it's really trying to capture an energy or a feeling that those words try to, put into one little succinct nugget that we'll never be able to do that with. Like a finger pointing to the moon, that saying.
Hmm. How can this tension be creative? I really love this one because I feel a lot of times we try to release ourselves from all the tension, but the tension is what creates space and time. It's what creates form. Without tension, it would all just, bloop, you know? And the it's really for me when I see this question, it really comes back to is the tension that I'm holding within inside of myself a conscious tension, and if it's conscious, what is that like, what is that saying, right? Like, what, when it comes out, is it a destructive tension, or is it a tension that's like a waltz, right? Like it's held together and it's moving, but it's formed, but it's still fluid, right? There's a tension there. You feel the tension when two partners dance in one of those really romantic ways, right? Like Gomez Adams and Morticia, right? Like you feel the tension, even in the music, the ambiance. It's necessary to create the environment, but it could very easily, right? That passion, that tension could become very destructive. Maybe the man who's leading looks at another woman while he should be paying attention to Morticia, right? And then all of a sudden there goes a knife across the room. I think that's in one of the videos. That's why I'm using that. Because she has that moment of her own desire, her own illusion. Because we all know that Gomez is never going to love anyone but Morticia. But in the moment of her own humanness, right? She has that forgetfulness, and her tension becomes destructive instead of constructive. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think that it's easy for truths to be unseen unless there's tension to bring them to the surface. And like it mentioned, that idea that if you can't see eye to eye, what can you see? And oftentimes it's hard to even see eye to eye with yourself. Being torn by different decisions you might want to make, or trying to take a side in different issues that you see as being problematic in your life or in the lives of people that you love, or just out in the outer world. Um, there's bound to be disagreement, but making it through those disagreements where everybody can still come out the other side and maybe learn something valuable about themselves and about each other is something that is kind of an alchemical process. It's kind of being bound in the walls of that cauldron, so to speak, where you're limited, but that limit creates the pressure and the boiling point at which things can transform in. And it's easy to attack the cauldron and be frustrated with our circumstances. But really, your life can be your greatest teacher. And you can use all the spaces that you wish didn't exist to form something greater, or just come upon the greatness that's already inherently there by having some of those illusions of maybe things that you need or you demand uh, to be negotiated with.
Yeah, yeah. Even our internal world is a dance, right? It's a waltz with Gomez and Morticia even inside of ourselves. The beauty of the alchemical process, right? The macros to micros and all of it. If I see it out there and it moves me, it's in here and it's moving me. And to see that movement is to come, from my understanding of the alchemical process is to come into that embodiment, to be able to be willing to dance too, because sometimes, we just want to be wallflowers, right? And is being a wallflower part of the dance, and if we're, and maybe from my vision, like you said, it was sometimes when I would see eye to eye on ourselves, right? From my vision, being a wallflower might not be part of the dance, but from a wallflower's vision, they're part of the audience. Therefore, they're making that essence there too, right? So seeing that, being able to see that space in between. And I love that, because your eye can never see your eye, right? Like my finger can never touch my finger. And because of that, there will always be this lack of understanding in it of itself that I'll just never be able to quite get to, and to understand as we go back to the macro micro that exists in here. There's pieces of me I'll go my whole life, and then when I'm dead, I'll hear everybody talking about it, and I'll be like, everybody knew? Like, why didn't somebody tell me? Right? Because we assume we should know all these things about ourselves. And also, I'm the only one I know from the moment I'm born to the moment I die. And I know everything about me, every thought, whether positive, negative, fanciful, realistic, right? I know every dance move I've ever made. And if to be able to see eye to eye with myself may actually simply look like being willing to show up to the dance, right? And just be there, And I think that for me, that comes back to that first question of what if the difference were not a threat? What if my dancing, right? What if my dancing's not a threat to anything here? What if me being a wallflower is no threat to anything here? Go ahead.
What inspired you to start your channel? I'm just curious.
Oh,
that's a little off script.
No, that's a wonderful question. I'm just babbling theories over here anyways. I wanted a place like a lane that I could just share, and I could be safe to do that, right? And I could feel empowered and safe to do that. And so I kind of started it selfishly for myself to just share where I was at, you know. And as time went, it was really beautiful because the work that I do in my everyday life just kind of started filtering into the YouTube channel and thing. Like, it was like you said earlier, things that I was experiencing in my work out here, I was noticing people were reaching out to me from YouTube, like going through those same things. And I was like, well, oh, I just went through this experience, and I'm like, I want to share that with people. And yeah, just, and the interview part of it, I like to do because I like to know people. Like, you have a channel, and everyone watching this right now can go to your channel and see all your beautiful work and all you do and all that stuff. And I love the value in that, but like, I want to know you. Not only do I want to know you, but as a creator, I want to give a creator an opportunity to say, this is me. Like, this is what I am. And, you know, I'm willing to be this vulnerable in this moment, and, you know, just let people take that wherever they want to from there. You know, so it might not be the most fancy or well put together motives, but, you know, I'm here for the ride. I love the people. I love the experience. You know, I only post when I'm compelled. So, you know, it's just been really beautiful. I've met really cool people like you, and you know, your wife is engaged with me, and you know, I have all these beautiful people who just reach out and tell me all these things about their lives. And what an honor, right? To like be a space where people who have no idea who you are feel safe to be vulnerable.
Do you find it a therapeutic process?
Oh yeah, these they probably don't even realize that they've done this for me, but they started me on the process of wanting to learn to be more vulnerable. Because of the environments I came from, we learned that it was a threat, right? You know, if you show weakness, you're done, right? So we didn't do that. And you know, somewhere inside of me, I would validate it with the illusions I would tell myself, right? The protection mechanisms that were actually just keeping me from being completely present with myself and others. And so I was like, I'm going to do better. I'm going to do better for the ones that reach out to me, you know? And so in that process, I reached out to my friend who's very good at being vulnerable. She's very good at it. And she gives me a safe space to be that. And I was like, will you do some interviews with me? And she was like, are you sure you want to do this? And I was like, no, but you know, we're going to do it. And I'm going to be okay with however that works out, because I need to get this out of me in a way that feels safe, so that I can find the right words and the right way to say it. Because unfortunately, because of my background, I want to be honest, right? And also, I don't want to engage trauma in other people. And unfortunately, much of my childhood is that from a certain perspective, right? On another perspective, it's been an amazing journey of healing and growth. So, you know, when I went on that process with her, I kind of just threw it all out to all of the people and people, and I remember laying in bed at night and I was like, what did you just do? Right? These people are going to be like, what is going on here? But that's not what happened, Ryan. People reached out and they were like, thank you for sharing like such an intense thing in your life. You know, like, I've had this thing that I've carried around for 30 years, and like, I just always think to myself, nobody wants to hear that, you know. But hearing yours, I thought, wow, like, it felt good to hear what you had to say. And that was probably the first time in my life that people didn't get a hold of me being like, stop talking about that, you're triggering me. I can't stand your reflection because it makes me dismantle myself. So stop, you know? But that was a huge indicator to me that something had changed in me, right? Like the people hadn't changed. They were the same people, but the way I was perceiving my vulnerability to them and why I was being vulnerable to them changed. And it just, like, it's, as you know, those things just ripple out into the environment and then they come back to you and you're like, wow, I didn't expect this, but yes, you know. That's a great
That's beautiful.
question. Yeah, it's a great question. Does vulnerability come easy for you?
No. In fact, that's why it was difficult to even add anything to the readings. I used to be in a band and I would play drums, and so, I could perform and be in front of people. I also did some lead singing, and when I wrote the music, I would play guitar and sing. But sharing your thoughts with people is a lot more vulnerable. And in this world, it feels like so many times what people say can be turned against them fairly easily, especially if they're put out there on the internet or whatever. And I kind of did a lot of my own removing myself from all social media platforms for quite a while, to the point where jumping back into things with the YouTube channel just out of nowhere was really kind of a jump for me. And to work into it to the point where I feel like I can share my thoughts a lot more freely has been definitely a struggle. It's not easy by any means, but having done it for as long as I have, it's kind of become a lot more second nature. So yeah, and it's difficult for me to fake things. I tried being a salesperson several times, but my theory on that was that if somebody doesn't want a thing, then I don't want them to have the thing. So that didn't really work great for me. Yeah, I prefer to connect with people, and can only really do that based on genuineness. And you can only have a deep talk if you're being genuine. You know what I mean? And it's something that can be turned against you, but I mean, so can disingenuousness. You know what I mean? Whatever that word is. But uh, anyone can think anything about what you say or do. And so you might as well not worry about it. And if you offend somebody, or they don't take you the way you intend, it used to be something that really bothered me if what I intended was not received the same way that I intended it. To be misunderstood at all on any level was frustrating. And one of my largest frustrations. And so I guess maybe being over articulate has come from that. Trying to be very, very specific about how I say things largely might be due to the frustration of feeling like you're misunderstood. But yeah, it hasn't really come easy. Um, I had some breakdowns, honestly. The beauty that I see in the I Ching work that I do, and just the ideals that it puts forward, and that compared to how I feel like the world is, it was a whole period of time there where I was thinking about just ending my channel and stopping altogether. But I knew that the work was helping me, regardless of if it helped anybody else. And yet that tension between kind of really trying to pour myself out into this work and share it, and knowing that it could be of great benefit to people if they, really, really used it, and the feeling that that's not actually happening as much as I was hoping, and that uh, basically starting to feel like that imposter syndrome experience um, really got to me. So there were readings early on that I was doing where I would be reading something so incredibly beautiful, and I would start crying over it just in the middle of the video. And I don't even know, how many people ever watched that or even noticed it, because it was just, at the time, it didn't seem like many people were engaging. Um, but it's definitely been kind of like a give and take relationship between that sense of wanting more for the world and feeling like you have something to offer in that level, and then the feeling that it's not being, you know, accepted or integrated in any way that's going to help. It's like sitting on the words of the sages and knowing the power and impact they have, and wanting to kind of like have that blossom in humanity. And especially in times that feels like we're just at each other's throats so much. And that not seeing eye to eye reading that you just did really emphasizes that um, how can we look beyond the things that separate us to, you know, a more beautiful core that's always there, that's never going to go away. And how do you bring that beauty out where the beauty of that is so incredibly gorgeous that it overshadows any of the ugliness that we kind of perpetuate?
And going back to what you said earlier too about the opposition, is it, you know, this is we're going through a very tower card energy kind of thing, right? And that what appears to be opposition may actually indeed be exactly what's eye to eye with what we're looking at, which is the destruction for the sake of creation of something better, you know?
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful how we, like you said, we can take, I actually did, it's funny you said that. I did a video on this earlier today, but I was talking about how, you know, even whenever, you know, your child comes in with their milk thing, their milk cup, right? And they drop it on the floor. We have a lot of choices there, don't we? And what if we choose to say, wow, look at that artwork you just created, and all you had to do was drop your cup. Look at that. You know, let's get towels and help each other clean this up. This is really cool. You know, and in the process of that cleanup, we can, you know, really engage them with culture, with like the ideas of, oh, this reminds me of the monks with the mandalas when they go one piece of sand at a time. They spent 18 hours, like 6 of them, over this mandala. And then they pick it up and they blow it away, just to symbolize the impermanence. And, you know, like really bringing our children into these things that seem like moments of opposition, but bringing the beauty to them and helping them understand that those things are emergent. They're qualities of each other that which is next emerges from. And we get to choose what emerges from those moments, right? Like I can yell at you about that milk, and from that moment, there can be an emergence of me being like, oh, did I just yell at my kid, right? Because we're parents, we're human. And then being like, oh, how do I fix this? Because that's what kids do, right? They take things on themselves. But you know, once again, even in that moment though too, we try to change that moment as a parent. You know I've on my path of cleaning it all out, I've looked on those moments and I'm like, what were you thinking, Core? You know, but then to step back and be like, you know, her and I both learned something very valuable in that moment, right? The way we walked forward was very different, so our outcomes were different. And also, it's always an opportunity to look back on that moment and make something, like you said, really beautiful emerge from it, which can change the whole dynamics of what came after it. You know, which for me is what actual like regressive therapy is the ability to do that, right? To look at something as really dark and heavy and intense for a really long period of time, and then one day be like, you know what? There was one thing that was really beautiful in that. And I'm going to take that nugget, I'm going to place it in my heart, and I'm just going to keep polishing that one nugget. Anytime I think these thoughts that are unkind to me and to this experience, I'm just going to remember that nugget from that experience until I can sit with this stuff over here without judgment of myself or anyone else. So yeah, like it's funny how opposition works. I say all that to say that, and once again, like we want to help people, but sometimes our help really stands in the way of like their journey, right? Because we're just so fixated on how we want it to look for them because we know how it feels, or we know how it is to go from oh to oh. And if I was laying with my head in the gutter, as I was at one point, legitly as a drug addict before all of this, and I can bring myself to this chair, imagine someone who's starting from a medium position, and why wouldn't they want that, right? But some people, for me, just in my teaching journey and my YouTube journey, like I've really had to reconcile, some people really don't want help. And one question I've come to ask quite frequently when people come and express themselves, because I want them to feel free to express themselves, but I ask them, do you want comfort or do you want solutions? Right? Like, do you just need to vent, or do you actually want me to help you forward? Because what I found is I'm a solutions person. That's just how I operate. And most men operate that way too, which is always really interesting. And I work a lot with men because I get where they're coming from, because I'm like, why else would you be telling me this unless you wanted a solution? So I've had to start asking people, like, which do you need? And, I always do the rule of 3. I'll give you a venting place for the same subject 3 times. But after that,
Solutions.
Yes, you don't get a choice anymore which one you want. Because that's something I've had to learn to do, to honor my own boundaries, because as you know, it can just keep coming if you let it. People say, oh, sit there and be compassionate and unconditionally loving. Do you have 5 hours a day to sit with the same person and hear them repeat the same thing over and over again and take none of your advice? I mean, if you have the time and energy to do that, bless you, baby. You're a saint. You deserve so many cookies. I just don't have it. It's not that I don't, and I don't even want to give it, because am I helping them?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, what's the value of my help and just like being the dumpster for trauma that I had no hand in committing or creating with them, So yeah, this is a great conversation. Please, do you have something to say?
Yeah. How has your work been most transformative for you?
The work I offer is my work. It's my process. I came from a what I like to call a highly energetic environment. I, I was born into darkness, and I stared in it so long, it stared back and became a piece of me. And there became a moment in my life that I had to face myself, and I had to decide. And when I made that decision, I sacrificed literally everything. Like I took the rule 1 of alchemy very seriously. That which you want to obtain, you must sacrifice the equivalent value to. And for me, that was my entire life. And that's what I sacrificed. My job, my career, my family, my friends, my identity. And I went out to the woods and I prepared myself for what I knew was going to be a very long and a very hard journey. I found quality people who didn't just teach things, they moved in the way that they taught, and they did it well. And I would be like, that's something I want to be able to do. And I'd say, hey, I'm struggling with this. Will you, how much will it cost me for an hour of your time to tell me the nuggets, to just tell me the nuggets? And they would obviously generally give me their time for free. But because I was able to be placed in the places I was placed, I was given some really cool nuggets, right? And so I started just building my own my own red book, which is basically what they have you do when you go in as a spiritualist, is build your own red book. So I just started building my own red book. And instead of, at a certain point, I stopped reaching out to like groups of people or what everybody else was doing. And I started really embodying that divination within myself. And when, like you said earlier, I stopped asking other people their opinion on things. Like I started doing it from in here. And as I started doing that more, I had all these like whoas and all these moments. And I just kept writing it down. And then one day, my mentor had a conversation with me, and she told me it was time for me to start teaching. And I said, I don't know enough to like, I don't know these big words. Like you can read me really large concepts and I get them on a fundamental level and how to apply them. Right. I said, but I don't get all this stuff like in the ways that you scholarly people do. I just don't. And she said, do it anyways. Right. And so I just started the process. And as I started the process, people just started showing up in my life, just like out of nowhere. They'd just come up to me and they'd go, you. And I'd be like, me? Like, what do you mean me? You know? And they'd be like, something tells me I need to talk to you. And that process just kept going, you know? And then it was so then I just templated. I had that whole red book. And so I made what I call fluid templates. So it's basically like mindful moments like that we all as humans, because like your anger doesn't look like my anger, yet we all have these fundamental aspects that our anger functions from, and in ways that we can switch the perspective to move it along a little different. So I started trying to form how I could relate that to people, because I don't want to sell you a program. I want you to be sovereign, you know, in your spirituality and your selfness. I want to say something to you and you look at me and be like, no, that's not me. That don't feel right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And to stand in that. And that's the funny thing. Me as a teacher, I'll do things like that on purpose to people. I will intentionally say something to you that you and I both know is wrong, because I want you to know what it feels like to stand up for yourself to someone that you think that you might not be able to, because there's an air of authority. There's no authority over you here,
Mhm.
you know? And the more I got to dance in that, my own process just naturally flowed. And then their processes were flowing. And before you know it, we had these networks of people all over the place that knew each other and knew me. And, you know, I offered people myself, and as I did that, they gave themselves to me in a way that we could work together to create real change for people, because we were able to sit so vulnerably with each other that we could see all of our parts. There was no hiding there. So I knew these people were people who were legit people, and that they could build something that was bigger, and that their focus was on something bigger. So my business is actually a cooperative environment. I've never charged a set fee. Whatever the time is worth to you, that's it. And sometimes that is really the person's willingness to do the work that we talked about for that day, right? Because that's the biggest payoff. That's the payoff, you know, do the work, let it resonate outwards, and get it, you know. And I've been so graced, because in that process, I've met other people who do that too. And through that, we've built retreats together. None of us got paid. None of us got paid, but we all went into it with the understanding that there were sacrifices in our personal lives that we were going to have to make to pull this together, to have this moment to experience with each other, to set a seed of resonant value. And then we just keep replicating that in different ways. So, yeah, you know, that's a really lengthy way to answer your question, but it really has been the process from my birth to now, given to the world in the best way that I can, without, you know, creating situations where people might feel any type of expectation from me for them, other than I believe in your capabilities. I believe in your capacity to be the best you at every moment, and that whatever you're going through in your life, you can, not only can you get through this, but you will get through this, and you'll be a better version of yourself because of it. And I just want to keep giving that. And, you know, if that means living off tuna, then c'est la vie, you know. In the Bible, what does it say? Grant me today my daily bread. I like to add the addendum, may my hands be worthy of receiving it. You know, because for me, that is my walk. And that's basically the reason Black Raven Meditation was created on YouTube, because it's hard to say that honest and that strong of words to people who just might not be there yet. And they might not be, this might not be the life for them to be. We're not the same. We're not on the same journey. You know, there are days, and I'm sure you feel this way too, Ryan, there are days I would love to just go and work at a gas station and just breathe, you know, and yes, I could go do this work at a gas station, kind of. That's kind of an illusion too. I don't think that's actually, I don't think you can work a 9-to-5 job and do this work actively in the ways that it needs to be done so that it creates real change. Because it's the energy needs alone. You know, it's just, you know, I see your eyes getting bigger. Everyone can't see it, but I know you know. It's almost impossible, right? For an average person to really get down with their spiritual journey in this environment. You know, so what can we do? What can I do as someone who has been granted that capacity to just keep giving out to the world, so that maybe the message will just resonate so loud that we can all start looking with a little more clarity and realize, what are we actually killing ourselves for? You know, I go to a job to pay for my hair to get done, my nails to get done, my makeup to get done, the car, the gas to get there. I go to work to pay to go to work. But if I'm willing to sacrifice that network, if I'm willing to sacrifice for a little less nicer car, just for now, if I'm willing to sacrifice all these things and I really absorb myself in the essence of what it is to be a spiritual being living through the physical manifestation of consciousness, you know, like that's what I live for. And I personally am willing to sacrifice literally everything for that. And as crazy as that may sound, I'm okay with other people not doing that at all. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love the people that I know who are just raw hillbilly good old boys that wear suspenders with one arm down. They got a hole in the ass, and you know, because they're real.
Mm-hmm.
And if they do something for you, they mean it. You know, so I don't care that they don't know what I know, or that they're not on the path I am. They're good people. And they're fun. I don't want a bunch of people like me. I'm quite boring. I'm you know, I love the textures of life that aren't of my dailiness, you know, and to honor them with other people, I just think is how could we lose?
Yeah. Henry David Thoreau, he would move whenever he wore a path in the ground. He would just get up and leave. And there was somebody I ran across on YouTube who was talking about that they were experiencing living out in the wilderness, where they would be in fresh situations constantly. And what that does to you, it's like your mind always has to pick up the newness of everything, and it's constantly processing, and it almost like quiets down all of the thoughts, and allows you to almost discover and realize the beauty of everything that's happening, without feeling like it's just ordinary. if you were to say that through your life and experiences and the kind of nuggets that you've been able to cultivate, what would you say your medicine is, like a shamanic medicine that you have to offer? How would you describe that?
Nurturing wisdom. You know, I was raised in a way that allows me to see it all. You know, I have a tendency to focus on the glitter because I love to dance, you know, but I see the background and I see the characters and I see what's going on. My eye is never off of them, you know, and I think that's been a huge benefit to me, you know, and because I've had the opportunities to sit in such heavy places, but be dependent on the people from which I was sitting in those places with, I had to learn to navigate with empathy to get the train back on track, right? And because my parents have been my greatest teachers, I've been able to take those nuggets that I learned from them and implement them into myself, and really say, you know, if like when my negative voices get going, what I remind myself of is, you sing to the morning dew and welcome tiny humans to earth. You know, like I have to maintain, like I have to remind, like I have to remind myself, like I walk in love. I'm an embodiment of love, and I have to be okay with that. Like I can't let anyone else's view, you know, I think you hit on this earlier too. I can't let anyone else's view of me distract me from the bird calling, you know, wind dancing woman that I am, and to hold on to that with both hands, because the opposition is a real thing in so many layers within the dimensions of life. But if I can hold on, I can make it through. And I know that I can do that because I've done it before. I did it my whole life growing up. I survived. Through that survival. I created and maintained some very maladaptive behaviors. But since I was able to and willing to really see myself and then sit with myself as if I was sitting with those who hurt me, but I still loved, right? I just, all that love that I had for them that allowed me to survive and not have a hard heart from it, I gave that to myself, because it was the one thing that I needed from them, but that I was always in the position of offering. So I turned it in, Ryan, and I just gave it to myself over and over and over again. And through that process, it naturally just transformed me.
Well, nothing about this conversation or you seems boring to me at all. You mentioned being boring, but I don't see that.
You know, I spend 90% of my days with my nose in books or writing. So, you know, I'm always really grateful when I get to have just, you know, really open and just where each of us are at conversations, you know, because, you know, I say often, I survive just well on my own, but I thrive when I'm with people. And when we're enjoying, and when we both want to be there, right? We don't have to be there for a purpose. We just both enjoy being there. We want to be there, and just being able to show up as my best version of myself, whether I'm in my 90% in my lair, you know, or I'm out with the public, just giving it all, just shimmying, you know, and letting other people shimmy. Because that's an interesting thing about this too, is I'm prone to seriousness. I have a French and Celtic background where, you know, there's an air here, you know, and you would think that going through all these Eastern studies and all this development that I've been through the past year, that it would make me even more like that. But it's actually taught me how to play. You know, because like it's like you learn so much, and you've probably experienced this too. It's like you learn so much, and you just realize how silly it is. Oh yeah, we talked about this earlier too with the children's book. It's just so silly, you know. And then you think, well, am I learning all this just to sound really smart? And then, like you said, that imposter syndrome sits in, and then you have to grab your golden thread again and pray, you know. And then
Exactly.
you just realize one day, like, I am that. All this stuff I've been studying, all these things I've been trying to be my whole life, I am that. And I know that because of the way I move. And I don't need anyone else to see it anymore. You know, if they're meant to feel it, they'll feel it. I have no doubt about that, right? But if they can't hear it, that's okay. You know, I've had to learn that as a teacher. All I can do is give you the information I have. I can't control what you do with it or how you respond to me as I offer it. Those are things that are completely out of my control. 5 years ago, me would have insisted that you let me control that. You know, but the me now says, oh, is that what you took from it, dear? Okay, wonderful. You know,
It's
and then I
almost like
just,
the card reading that you did is really similar to the conversation that we're having. Like being in a situation where you have conflict as a way of life in your environment and in your just personal space. It's like out of survival, the choice that you have is to turn inward and to make something of it. And stop attacking or too much defending, and realize that if you're in between a rock and a hard place, the only way to transform your world often can just be that I'm going to do something internal, and I'm not going to let it affect me the way that it's affected me. And I'm going to be the better person. You know what I mean? And I'm going to do my best to hold up the obligations and the agreements that I have with the people that I care about to the best of my ability, whether or not anyone else is doing that. And how can I just rise to the occasion? And it sounds like you're very much making that a habit, and that habitual mulling over those things that you know are transformative for you, and that you're kind of like going over time and time again and just feeding yourself with this nutrients. Like you're bound to grow something beautiful out of that process.
yeah.
And I think that both of us very similarly work in that space. And I too feel it has been out of necessity to feel like there's some sort of ground that I can stand on, so to speak. And yeah, and yet at the same time, I'm still haunted by self-doubt and, um, what will people think? Am I a mockery entirely? All of that um, imposter syndrome stuff. Um, but I think that as you go, it feels like it's almost second nature to just bring from your inner world out what's cultivating, and the things that hung you up before. It's like a world of difference between then and now. It's almost like you're working with completely different um, game pieces than you started with. Like maybe you were making a mess of checkers and now you're playing chess, but you're also doing it successfully. And you didn't even realize that at any point at the process that the game was changing for you. And just the perspective. And I guess it feels like if enough of us were really active in that, or at least making progress in that direction, that the world would be quite rapidly transformed. And instead of turning outward and trying to attack the situations that freak us out, if we could do our best to hold up our end of the bargain, regardless of if anyone else is doing that, we could make something a little more peaceful out of our lives and out of just the world we live in. I'm hoping that, we can leave a world to our children's 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 children better than when we found it. And probably the history books for them, hopefully several generations from now, will look at us as people that did our best and that didn't just ride the situation because that was the time frame we lived in, but that we, transformed something to the best of our abilities into something better.
Yeah. Yeah. That was really well said. That was very well said. Thank you for sharing that. And it's really interesting you brought up about the children and the children's children. Did you know that a lot of times not only do people die in threes, but people are born in threes?
Huh.
So it's just a really interesting personal, not only I work in those environments, and I know a lot of people who work in those environments and have for a very long time. It's just a very interesting noticing that we've all kind of noticed. So along my path, it became I remember there was a time people were talking about purpose, and I thought, oh my gosh, like that could be anything, right? Like I could make hot dogs and make people happy. Like purpose could be anything, And then I started thinking about that 3 in, 3 out, 3 out, 3 in, 3 out, 3 in. And then I started thinking to myself, what if whenever this vessel goes back to the earth, my orb just goes to the next viable, human or vessel or whatever that looks like and how many ever years from now, right? That the next being, the physical form of a being. And then I thought, well, if that's true, then that baby's going to get that tiny human, as I call him, is going to get everything that I have in here. So if I was Mother Gaia, if I was God, what would be the best way that I could allow this child to come into the earth? Like, what's the best thing I could leave him with? And I just started working to that because it's the simplicity of it, the simplicity of, oh, if I got to offer this consciousness to a child, I want them to know that it's okay. No matter what happens, it's okay. And you'll get through it. And life is life. And it is okay.
I was watching.
Go ahead.
I was watching one of your videos on meditations for the Aquarian age, and
Yeah.
you mentioned in that video that we just stuff our head with data, and that sometimes it's good to actually act on it. And there's so much information, and what you said about how would you give your consciousness to a new being, and what state would you want that in? It's exciting for me when you say that, because in Taoism, as you probably well know, the sage's science is to work in reverse and to get back to that state before mundane conditioning of that innocence of the child. And so it's almost like so many facts are necessary to kind of process your way out of this maze that we've entered, that we think, like you said, your purpose, right? You entered this little maze and you finally stumble upon the center of it. And that's, I relate it to the Kung Fu Panda, where he gets the scroll and there's nothing on it.
Yes, that.
But that's kind of what it feels like in life sometimes. It's like you think there's this ultimate, you know what I mean? And you're eventually going to stumble on it. And then really, I think the work is to work your way out of that, back into that space of just being that innocent child. But for us, it takes that work, whereas it's like almost like an effortless effort, you know what I mean? Or that
Yeah.
balance between strength and stillness, or effort and relaxation.
Yes, you know, it's like creating a child. Like, do you know who Sri Anganandama is?
Sounds
She's a
very familiar.
You probably do without realizing it. She's also known as the Bliss Mother. So she's a she, obviously, but she lived her whole life. She was married, but she never consummated her marriage. Basically, from the time she could like she existed, she would just sit in what people would describe as a state of peace.
Hmm.
And as she began to talk, people would be like, why don't you do this or why don't you do that? And she'd just look at them and say, I know what I came here for. And so as she got older, she continued in this state. When she got into like her early 20s, a much older man came across her and fell in love with her as his muse, basically. And she was like, well, I'm just going to sit here and do what I do because that's what I do. And he was like, bet. So by the time she had passed away, he had actually built her an empire, like a community of 20,000 people. He had brought them in to just be in her presence, and she would just sit with them. And that's what I think, you know, when we talk about these things, right? Like, she wasn't ignoring anything, right? Like, you could perceive it as that, but she was just being her. And whatever we project, what we project onto her is like ours, right? It's even being a baby. You know, how many times have you heard adult humans tell tiny babies that they're bad or that they're being sneaky? You know, but that it reminds me of that backwards thing you're talking about, though. You know, because it and it's almost so complex that now that I'm actually like processing it all, because it is working simultaneously forward and backwards at the same time in order to be able to come together to the median point, which is even a little more above what I thought was going on. But that is what's going on. So it's
Like
like a
that space
collapse.
between, like
Yeah,
between the contradictions.
yes, the collusion from the space in between, bringing it together, that space in between. It's like oh, I love that. And what it creates, you know, because that could be the creation of the next thought, and we get to choose whether that that creation moment is going to continue the cycle of what we've always told ourselves, or if it's going to take on a whole nother life that gives life. Oh, I love this. This is so good.
It's like entering into it without the expectation of already knowing what's going to happen. You know what I
Yes.
mean? And being
Yeah,
willing to be surprised like a child might be about life at every given moment.
because you're so okay with it, right? That everything just becomes a moment, you know? And that's just to give that to the baby. You know, I'm here for it. I'm here for it. Oh, wouldn't that be nuts? Wouldn't that be nuts to like be having this conversation now, and then in another point of awareness in time and space, I'm born as the bliss mother. Like I'm talking about leaving my consciousness like that, and then you end up being them. We're getting weird now. I'm just playing. That's the metaphysician in me. I can't help but go further. But yeah, you know, I don't know. Thoughts.
Yeah. I definitely hope that we are able to make it through not only, you know, the current crises that are going on, but learn out of it who we are. Oftentimes, you never have kind of the just things you take for granted thrown in your face as much as when there's so much turmoil. And it's almost like the collective issues that we all share are just rubbed in our faces a bit, because if you think of like the Indra's net concept of each jewel reflecting all of the other jewels within it, then any kind of issues that we're seeing in the world are somehow related to reflections that we have within ourselves. And collectively, I feel like rather than being hung up on the things that divide us, being more focused on there's things that are creating this putrid process to bubble up to the surface that are requiring our attention. And the very moments where we're triggered by these things are the perfect moments to address them and how they're affecting us within ourselves. And sometimes that's your only option. But rather than turning away and being distracted, which sometimes you absolutely need, it's not like anyone can take all that in at once and just continually do that. But to realize that now is the perfect time while I'm being confronted with it to open up to how my inner world is resonating with that and how it might be out of tune a little bit. And how can I kind of create some harmony out of the dissonance that our external world is creating within each of us. And I think humming in harmony, but each person having their own very distinct notes is very important. That it doesn't have to be the exact same sound or note even, but it should at least be a resonance that we can all appreciate and think of as music when we hear it, rather than this kind of cacophony of just clashing about elephants in a china shop kind of
Screaming
activity.
cat. Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
what I hope for. I hope that doing inner work, but turning it outward is something that can be picked up on and people can start doing and realizing it isn't as scary of an operation as you would think. In fact, just being programmed through, media, news, all the ways that we're kind of programming ourselves and being programmed, we can choose to actively take part in that process and choose what we're programming and what we want to nourish. One of my favorite quotes by Hilary Barrett in her I Ching commentary, which some of the cards sounded like they were written from Hilary Barrett. It sounds like her words almost. Very familiar with her translation of the I Ching commentary or the I Ching.
I think that the little book they have in there is from her.
Either way, one of the things she says in one of the hexagrams is, if you accept this as nourishment, what will you become? And I think that that's just such a profound question. But if you think of it in those terms, how are we accepting things into our inner worlds? And what are we becoming because of that? What are we nourishing ourselves on? And if we could be a little bit more active in that process in choosing what those things are, that we're probably going to get a lot better garden out of the situation than just the randomness or the stuff that comes trickling down from above, so to speak.
Yeah.
Above meaning, hierarchically, societally, not like above spirit.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
And I love what you said about the nourishment. I watched that one the other day, and that is a great question. If I accept this nourishment, what is being created? Like what's happening here with that? And to really understand the dynamics of how that resonates through all of our systems. It's not because it might look like it's just an emotional thing, or it's just food, or it's just this, but there's this resonating factor, and to be aware of that resonant factor is what offers the totality of the experience in a holistic way. And I love what you said too, because what it reflects to me is that reminder of discernment, right? Because, you know, even in this process, yeah, you know, I go in and I go in hard, and also I take conscious breaths from the work so that I can process and that I can be healthy and I can still maintain my mundane things that I too must get done. And, you know, in the nourishments that we take in, if we do them in the ways that you're talking about, they help us create the discernment just because we start to feel the difference as
Yeah.
we become aware of them. And that's it, like you said earlier, it's one of those things. It's so simple. It's not easy, but it is simple. You know, if we're willing to really step back and allow ourselves the space to know that the knowledge we have is sufficient, and that there's so many nuggets of wisdom in there that we have yet to realize that even exist within us yet, you know. So it's like a treasure hunt inside yourself.
Yeah, I see even just the natural world being similar to that, like connecting with various druidic sacred trees, for instance, and stones and crystals and whatnot. It's like there's so many things going on that you almost have to train yourself to sense them, and sense the kind of differences and how they interplay with each other. And one of the alchemical classic Taoist texts described it sort of like honing a blade, like you're
Mm.
doing this work where you're picking up more and more subtle energies, and it's like this constant honing of this blade, this sharpening, until you have something that can cut and you can do fine tuning work with. But that's what I feel like, this combination of this rest and relaxation with this really study and integration mode, where you're kind of flowing with the times or with the Tao, and capitalizing on those moments where just in your body, you know what I mean? In your body and in your own sense of what you need, your body tells you that, you know what I mean? And when you listen and you harmonize with that, it's like you can work with the times to continually just sharpen and sharpen and sharpen that blade, and be able to sense things more and more and more subtly through that process. And realize that there's nothing, because we're so interconnected, that we can't really disconnect truly and put something external to ourselves. It is in our world, and I think that that's something that's being seen through a little bit lately, is that this idea that everybody can be completely walled cities and protected from everyone else, while we have this thing going on called, you know, all of the social media platforms, YouTube, TikTok, all of the ones. Anybody from any country can interact like this, all across the globe. And so this weird idea that we have, that we all need to really, really define our boundaries and be separate from one another and protect that, it's going on at the same time as you have this uh, ability to communicate with anyone at any time. And so it's weird that those are what's happening at the same time together. And it's like those worlds are grinding gears. And it would be nice if it didn't cost a lot of human life and a bunch of suffering to get those gears to work together, or see, you know, what boundaries we need to retain. But how do we also have this sense that everything is interconnected, and it needs to be able to function together properly, to make anything useful? It's just like riding horses towards a cliff, the way it feels like life is, just on a human level right now. And it's
Yeah.
would be nice to gain some sort of upper perspective, higher perspective, and act according to that rather than according to this just ego level, protect, lizard brain, I need this, it's mine, not yours kind of shit that we have going on. Just like the Native Americans viewing the idea that we could own land as being completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
That is
For me,
just such an
selling the
interesting
air
concept.
too. Yeah.
It's like the land is something we're a part of, not that you can own really anything. You don't even own your own body. You have to give that up in the end, right? So feels like we definitely need a lot of very, very large perspective shifts. And I think we're getting them, whether we like it or not, but it would be nice to get them an easier way that has a lot less cost of life attached to it.
Yeah, you know, like his, and it's a really it's a really delicate discussion right now, isn't it? Because it's a balancing act between compassion and the real human cost and the reality we can't trust our own eyes or what we see right now, right?
Mhm.
And so where do we how do we even discern where that space of truth is? Because we just don't know, you know. And so much of, you know, when we talk, you said about losing human life and the war and everything like that. And yeah, but you know, what I'm seeing too is, you know, on Facebook, right? People are arguing with people over things, and it's, you know, there's a piece of me that understands that they're scared, and also what they're sharing isn't even real information. It's not even truth. And or what they're sharing is information that's been put out specifically as a distraction, because if it was the truth, you'd be able to follow a paper trail back to the legalities of what it was. But it's so impulsive, right? Like it's just so reactive. And I don't know how much of it is kind of the way we've been programmed, or how much of it is this acceleration, because everyone's talking about this acceleration too. And for me, but just what I feel, what I know as being someone who's been a nature dancer my whole life, is when the technology stuff started amping up is when time started amping up. And time only started amping up whenever everyone started talking about time amping up, and then started like making the program and getting the videos out. Like we all collectively decided, right, to consolidate this time, to constrict this time. And in doing that, as you know, like with the Taoist principles, it expands, right? There are consequences to those actions that we've taken. And so we've created this illusion, because time is an illusion anyways. It's a measurement based on the perception of the people looking at it. So we've taken this illusion concept, and we've created an illusion on top of that illusion, sold it to people in spiritual development classes and self-help books and on YouTube behind paywalls as reality. They had no chance. Some of these people had no chance. They were not equipped for what was about to happen. You know, and I think that's why it's so beautiful that people like you, and I'm going to put myself in this category because I know I'm a 1950s agitator. You know, I'm not going to tear up your clothes, but, you know, we're going to beam around a little bit. But I feel people like us were intentionally put here for that purpose right now. And to be able to stir it up just enough to help people see that there's this in-between space where we're not seeing eye to eye. And because we can't see eye to eye on something, we're just seeing all this space, and it's exacerbating an issue in which most doesn't even need to be an issue because it's not even real. You know? And And those are the things that I'm doing my best to just kind of, like you said, sit from that bird's eye view, like be like the owl. Have you ever read that book, Becoming the Owl?
Uh-uh.
So there's this wonderful book. My mentor gave it to me in probably my second year into studies, right? When you start working on like working with the idea of learning to embody something, because as weird as it sounds, you have to learn how to embody things, right? So she gave me this book and it said Becoming the Owl. And I'm like, this is silly, you know? She's like, you're going to read this book. So basically in this book, it basically tells you that anytime you feel engaged, like any engagement, doesn't matter what it is, put yourself in the essence of an owl on a tree and gaze down on the situation and ask yourself, is this in any way impeding my food source? Is this in any way impeding my life? And you're watching it and it's getting loud, things are getting thrown around, and you're just sitting here thinking, is this, and then you say to yourself, is going down there to intervene going to be of threat to any of these other three? And if those answers are no, or this answer is yes, you keep your butt on that branch and you just watch. And when I started implementing that process, it started changing a lot of things. And I'm so grateful she gave that to me, because there's so many things that I see on the news or that I hear people talking about, and I have to sit up like I'm an owl in a tree, and I just have to be there, because it's all, you know, the advocate in me, the rebel in me, all these pieces of me that have these beautiful tensions that have created beautiful things, just want to be like, what the flaps is going on here? Like, you guys are out of your mind, you know? But that's not going to help, is it? Like, I might be able to say what I have to say, but is it helping anyone? Or is it actually hurting my position as an owl? You know, by my own movement of wing, not anybody else's. Because on my branch, I was fine just watching you throw your pillows and notebooks, you know, whatever you got to do, get it out, you know. But when I come down and I get involved, I have changed the dynamic of that situation. You know, and I feel we're doing that a lot with the things that we're seeing. We're coming in and either getting mad at it or wanting to change it, or wanting to change the situation that we don't even know if it's a real situation or not. And it compounds that energy that actually keeps those things going. What do they call it? Adversarial energy, I think is what they call it. So when you fight against something and you actually feed it exactly what it needs to accomplish its goal.
What you resist persists, that concept.
Yeah. Yeah. So just, I don't know. I'm not sure how to teach people, or if we can even teach people like how to use discernment right now, other than just be an owl.
Well, I feel like part of the thing that I was put here to do is to, despite myself, attempt to draw people together and find that space, essentially, that is between people not being able to see eye to eye what can be seen, and hold space for that, and have it be okay to be yourself, and you know, as long as it's not hurting anyone else. Those basic principles, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if we want to like be able to leave a planet for our children and for the animals and for nature and all of it, and be able to have something that's sustainable, then it is going to come from a space where we're, you know, more so than not working together and trying to overcome the ways that we clash in ways that are mutually beneficial rather than just adversarial. And it is kind of a situation, I think, similarly to Einstein saying that the solution to a problem has to be from a higher level than what created the problem in the first place. And so that is kind of like a rise above the adversarial energy to something that sees something that is above that seeing at odds.
Yeah.
What can be seen, it's like being trapped in that seeing at odds doesn't allow you to see anything past it. Whereas those are the spaces where that pressure and that I was always able to look at things this way until this happened. And then when this happened, I'm forced to look more closely at just the thing that I believe uh, just through my upbringing, or just I've always believed that. And something else can hopefully be birthed out of that. Maybe it was always there hiding, and it was just that thing that can't really be put into words that unites us all, that no amount of disagreement could really distract from for too incredibly long. One thing I really like in one of the Tao Te Ching verses, it says that anything that is not of the Tao cannot last long. And with the Tao, it is this natural way that life works, and that it just spills into every moment, and it's the essence, and the flow. And when we're living at odds with that, we're really creating our own tower. I mean, we can build it as long as we want, but it's something that is destined to collapse. And I like what Terence McKenna said one time. He said that we're birthing the new world. And to a large degree, we're responsible for what that birth looks like, what shape the mother will be in when that child is born, what shape the child will be in when it's born, and all of the factors. And I think that we look at ourselves maybe a little too much as observers that aren't affecting what we observe. But we already know, in science, that that's not the case, that the second that there is an observer, it affects what is observed.
Mm.
So it does become important, I think, very much so, how we observe. And are we doing that from an adversarial position, or are we doing that from that position where if you can't see eye to eye, what can you see?
Good circle around. I love that. Right on time too. Somehow we've spent 2 hours having this conversation. So I appreciate you taking out this time and being here and sharing your wisdom and your vulnerability and all the beautiful things. And I this may sound weird, but I appreciate you and your wife and your family connecting. And, as you said, I feel when we meet certain people, we can just feel that, like, oh, they're a part of my network now, like, and you and your wife have kind of been that, like, background node in my life, a part of that background node in my life. So I think that's really cool. And that you guys are kind of open to that process, even though we don't really know each other, I think is really cool. Because I know there's been times I've watched you after making a video, and I literally, there's no way, we were both like making the video at the same time, but somehow the video was about the same things. And that tells me that, those connections exist and that they're very real. And that, like you said, that all we have, if I do my part, there's going to be someone else on that network with me who's going to do their part. And if we all just do our part in those moments, we're compelled to do it, we have the bravery to put it out there, we'll just keep seeing more and more people who are doing what we're doing. And that is the stage, that is the step, So yeah, thank you so much for everything you do, and thank your wife and your family for allowing you to come and talk to us for a couple hours today. We're very appreciative.
Same. Very beautifully stated. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Oh, and by the way, tell everybody where you're at. I know you're doing some other podcasts with people and stuff now too. Let everybody know where they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, I'm at Tao Druidry on YouTube. So TaoDruidry, and actively at this point with Helen of Eye of the Serpent Tarot and Timeline Traveler Tarot. We're right now in the process of doing this developing conversation between people that either just mentioned that they wanted to be involved or have channels of their own potentially, but trying to create some sort of community where we can discuss stuff that comes up and just see where the conversation goes, kind of like the flow of the Tao, that kind of idea where we're really trying to not control it too incredibly much. Obviously, to the degree where things that are profitable are being brought forward, obviously. But yeah, if anybody would want to get involved in that, feel free to reach out to myself or her. But yeah, I would love to have kind of like an ongoing community organically developed that can do just this, where we may not be able to see eye to eye on everything, but what can we see together is going to be greater than the sum of the parts.
Beautiful. I thank you everyone for joining us today. I'll put everything he talked about in the description box, and much appreciated.